The USS Enterprise was the immediate successor of the Forrestal class of aircraft carriers, and she represents another milestone in the history of modern warships. The USS Enterprise was different in that she had missiles instead of cannons as defensive armament, in that she had her superstructure in a more backward position, and in that she had her larboard elevator reallocated astern to allow aircraft to take off from the larboard catapults without impediment anytime. The larboard elevator, unfortunately placed at the fore end of the landing strip, had been quickly acknowledged as the most obvious shortcoming in the design of the Forrestal class. The USS Enterprise entered service in 1962, and she was the second surface warship in the world fitted with nuclear propulsion, following the missile cruiser USS Long Beach. These two ships had some things in common. Both were single units in their respective classes, both were pioneers of nuclear-powered propulsion, and both had superstructures of a peculiar shape, for they were fitted with the Scannfar system, the first generation of phased array radars designed to improve the tracking of multiple airborne targets. The distinctive appearance was given by the static planar antennas attached to the superstructure. The Scannfar system was the predecessor of the current and successful Aegis system. The subsequent missile cruiser USS Bainbridge was another nuclear-powered and unique ship in her class. The USS Enterprise, along with the USS Long Beach and the USS Bainbridge, formed the all-nuclear-powered Task Force 1, and in 1964 they undertook Operation Sea Orbit, traveling around the world without refueling their nuclear propulsion plants. With a standard displacement of 76,900 tons, the USS Enterprise had an overall length of 335.9 meters, an overall beam of 76.8 meters and a draft of 10.8 meters. With a propulsion power of 280,000 shaft horsepower, the USS Enterprise could achieve a maximum speed of 35 knots, and thanks to her nuclear reactor she could travel over 216,000 nautical miles before requiring a nuclear fuel resupply. The complement of the USS Enterprise was around 5,500 people, who consumed around 12 tons of food daily. The facilities on board included a small hospital, diverse recreation rooms, such as a library with thousands of volumes, and a television station. Many radars were dedicated to scan the air, sea, or terrain hundreds of miles far away, whilst hundreds of antennas connected the USS Enterprise with any of the main military command centers of United States. The USS Enterprise carried from 80 to 100 aircraft, an equivalent to 7 aviation squadrons. This modest but comprehensive air force comprised all of the resources necessary to perform any offensive or defensive task, including air superiority, tactical ground attack, strategic bombing or anti-submarine warfare, and it was more powerful than the largest part of national air forces in the world. Around 1,800 people were dedicated to fly and maintain this air wing. This photograph, which was taken in an early time in the service life of the USS Enterprise, shows the flight deck occupied by many aircraft, such as the A-4 Skyhawk ground attack aircraft, the F-4 Phantom air superiority fighter, the A-3 Sky Warrior bomber aircraft, the A-5 Vigilante bomber and reconnaissance aircraft, and the E-1B Tracer early warning aircraft. Each of the 4 5-bladed propellers had 6 meters in diameter and weighed 32 tons. Each of the 4 rudders had a size close to 30 square meters and weighed 35 tons. The hull was protected by an aluminum belt of 203 millimeters in thickness, which was as resistant as a rolled homogeneous steel armor plate of 100 mm in thickness, but a 30% lighter. Numerous radars watched air and sea hundreds of miles around the USS Enterprise, and hundreds of antennas connected her with the main U.S. military commands, while sophisticated electronic war systems were ready to disturb enemy radar signals. This huge capital ship also had her own TV station. The USS Enterprise could embark 90 aircraft if required, but the hangar, whose height was equivalent to that of 3 normal decks, offered space for up to 66 aircraft along with maintenance equipment, and communicated with the externally placed elevators through large openings which could be closed by sliding panels. SCANFAR was a phased-array radar system, intended to be better at tracking multiple airborne targets than conventional rotating radar antennas. SCANFAR consisted of 2 radars, the N/SPS-32, long-range air search and target acquisition radar, and the N/SPS-33, square array used for 3D tracking. These early phased arrays, replaced around 1980, were responsible for the distinctive square-looking aisles of the USS Enterprise and the missile cruiser USS Long Beach. Each of the 2 anchors weighed 30 tons. Arresting barriers are raised during emergency landings, when an aircraft cannot use its arresting hook to catch the arresting cables. Arresting cables are intended for landings in normal conditions. They are made of steel and can bring an aircraft traveling at a speed of 250 km/h to a complete stop in a distance as short as 100 meters. The USS Enterprise had 4 arresting cables installed at certain distance of each other to facilitate the landing operations. Elevators did not have a rectangular shape, unlike those found on previous aircraft carriers. They were given a new shape with an angled area added to one of their sides, which allowed to operate with longer aircraft. The Grumman E-2C Hawkeye is an early warning aircraft which was introduced during the 1960s and remains in service after more than 50 years. The main purpose of these aircraft was to detect the Soviet bombers with enough anticipation to allow fighter aircraft to intercept them before they could attack the war fleet. In 1969, the USS Enterprise was armed with only 2 launchers for RIM-7 Sea Sparrow air-to-air missiles, which had a short range of about 19 kilometers, and were intended mainly as close-in weapon systems for destroying incoming anti-ship missiles. Blast deflectors are hydraulically raised when jet aircraft are about to take off, to protect deck personnel and equipment from the engine's exhaust blast, and lowered again as soon as the aircraft have been launched. The 4 steam-powered catapults on the USS Enterprise could move a weight of 35 tons at a speed of 140 knots along their 85 meters long rails. Most takeoff configurations would require a catapult to put the aircraft on the air on such a short distance. Water brakes are used to disperse the enormous kinetic energy that the shuttle would otherwise transmit to the ship's structure. Using the 4 catapults simultaneously, the USS Enterprise could launch an aircraft every 30 to 45 seconds. Visible from a considerable distance, a 25 meters wide strip painted on the angled flight deck of modern aircraft carriers helps the pilots to align their aircraft properly during landing maneuvers. The Vought F-8 Crusader was one of the fighter aircraft embarked on board the USS Enterprise during the 1960s. These aircraft were armed with 4 20mm cannons and had 6 hardpoints for carrying up to 2,000 kilograms of bombs, rockets, or air-to-air/surface missiles. These structures, also called horns, were used to catch the bridles, cables connecting the catapult shuttle with the aircraft, for reuse. When the aircraft left the deck, the bridles could fall on the bridle arrestor rather than into the sea, the downward angle prevented that bridles bouncing up could hit and damage the aircraft.